All right, so I'm back for my next video in my series on the evolution of the flower business with regard to the wire services and how you should be saving money when you send flowers, not get ripped off. You're my customer, so you're my friend, and I don't like it if you get ripped off. So let me find my handy marker and my handy washer thing here. So to give some dates or some time that you can understand where we're at in this process, when FTD was sold, the internet was starting to come alive. So it was the mid 90s, mid to late 90s, okay? So FTD was sold, and everybody kind of knew what that meant. A group, if I'm not mistaken, the first purchaser of FTD was Perry Capital, the same people that owned Rite Aid, I think, is who it was at the time. Rite Aid, the drugstores. So you still had Teleflora, which was an independent wire service, and you had, at this point, kind of a fledgling coming along, 800 Flowers, okay? So you would call your florist, and your florist would send your flowers through FTD to somebody out of town or through Teleflora. 800 Flowers was not a wire service. 800 Flowers was using what was then still AFS exclusively to send their orders to florists that would receive those orders through the wire service AFS. Teleflora had a young man, well, it wasn't young, I guess, I don't know. His name was Greg Kakari. And Greg, I knew personally, and Greg was the CEO, he was in charge of Teleflora, and the resounding message that Greg had always was, at Teleflora will never compete with you. And that was when it all started. What that meant was FTD had made it clear that they were going to begin to use the internet to sell directly to the consumer. Well, I'll just draw a picture. There, that's the consumer right there. They were going to start selling directly to the consumer, which is what 800 Flowers was doing, because they were saying that 800 Flowers is going to capture all of the market and it's going to take away from the florist, and we want to protect the florist, which was all a bunch of garbage. They were not interested in protecting the florist, although that's what they were saying. But Greg said, we will never, ever compete with you. Never. We won't be that guy. Okay. So we move forward a few years, and I do want to address something here. This is a little history. 800 Flowers was started by a guy in Texas somewhere. This is the story that's been told to me by people that knew him. And he had a great idea. He had bought the phone number 800 Flowers, and he was marketing it like crazy in Texas. So much so that he had to file bankruptcy and went broke. Now, as I understand it, what happened was he went bankrupt, and that telephone number became part of the bankruptcy auction. A guy by the name of Jim McCann and his brother, I think his name is Chris, they owned a flower shop in New York City that was quite successful. They had heard this was for sale. They bought it at a bankruptcy auction for pennies on the dollar, and that was about the time that the 800 Flowers telephone number really started to take off, is what happened. So they bought it on the back of the bankruptcy and started to reap the results of that one man's marketing efforts and genius. Not that the McCanns aren't geniuses. They are. I mean, they know what they're doing. This is no slight against them. But they bought this at a prime time. And so they were sending at that time a huge amount, all of their orders through AFS. And they were becoming quite the powerhouse as far as sending goes. That was what was happening. So FTD, when it was sold, Perry Capital said, there's a huge market in what this guy down here is doing. We're going to do the same thing. And that was when Teleflora tried to distinguish themselves as a wire service to try to lure florists to be a member of their institution. We will never compete with you, ever. Okay, so that ended up happening. So let me explain something, what's important here, okay? This right here is going to be a receiving florist. This is a sending florist, okay? And I'm sorry about math. I know a lot of people get bored with numbers, okay? Let's say you spend $100, all right? Yeah, okay, got it. All right, so we've got the sending florist and the receiving florist, okay? The sending florist would be, in the previous thing that I had mentioned, the ftd.com or the 800 flowers. That's the sending florist, okay? So based on the commission structure, you spend $100 there, and so the sending florist, or this, let's just assume it's still in the flower business that this is happening. The sending florist will collect from this sale $20 just for taking the order because of the commission. And in today's world, I'm going to use today's numbers, they will likely collect a I'm going to be fairly conservative and say they're collecting a $15 charge. Okay, so when you call and send this, they collect $35. They then send this florist the order for $100. Okay, now they're taking their commission. The customers don't need to know about that. That's nothing that anybody needs to be concerned about. But when you're the sending florist, I've taken a $100 order and I have literally made a $35 profit off of that, 35% net profit off of that, for handling the order for maybe 3 minutes. And I have zero product cost. I have nothing, okay? This florist here, keeping in mind, okay, that they're actually paying to receive the order. Thanks. All right, this $100, okay, if they're making a $7 net profit, okay, that means that's how much money they make at 100% value. Okay, 100% value, they're making $7, okay? But they have paid this florist $20 for the commission, and the way that so that puts us at -13. And if they belong to the wire service the way that it is now, they have to pay another $7. So we are now, you can see here the math in this, what I was talking about in previous videos. The money's in sending, not in receiving. And as long as you're sending orders out more than you're receiving orders in, you make money. So you can see here, okay, we're at a -$21 by taking this order from this other florist. We're losing that much money, losing $21. Here, we're making $35 by sending the order out of town and doing nothing. We've got all the labor, all the work, all the product, all the delivery costs, everything to get to our $7 net profit if we're running our business the way that we should, and we're forking over all this money, so we're actually losing $21. So you can see where this math works, okay, is you've got the $35 for sending out of town, you've got the -$21. That disparity is what my grandpa will always talk about when he told me, always send more than you receive. Don't ever let your receiving get to be more than what you're sending. Well, the guy that started 800 Flowers as a little entity figured out, if I could just do this for a living and forget owning a flower shop and send it to all these other suckers that'll take it and fill it for me, you can see we've now gone from a 7% net profit on the orders that we're sending out of town, or I'm sorry, on the business in general, the gross revenue, to a 35% net profit. Which would you do? I mean, what are you gonna do? You're gonna do this. And so the companies that started doing this realized huge, huge money in sending. Let's start just sending our flowers, just send only. We're not gonna open a flower shop, we're just gonna have an office that takes these orders and sends them out of town and collects money and act as a clearinghouse for the public. Make it easy, one-stop shop. The florist doesn't have to worry about, or the customer doesn't have to worry about finding flowers. So I'm sorry about the math side of this, but it's important to understand that there's huge money in sending, no money in receiving. And the only reason that this worked historically for the florist was because most florists were able to maintain at least a 1-to-1 ratio. I'm sending out one order for every one that I'm receiving. It goes back to the good old days at FTD when it was like you're doing your neighbor florist a favor by taking their order, and they will do you the same favor when you have to send in other places. As it's grown over the years, it's kind of taken an evolutionary turn in this direction where a couple of people figured out whoa, boy, if I could just do that, that's what I'm going to do. So I hope that helps explain a little bit of the math behind the old FTD model and how that then evolved into having these what are now called order gatherers. People that do nothing but just take orders, which I am going to address in my next video. Thanks for stopping by.